Good morning everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update for the Australian region this morning on the 6th of April 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo and I guess the topic of conversation today will have to be Tropical Cyclone Ita. Firstly, before we start, we thank our Facebook following. Our social media following is now grown to 97,000. We're getting pretty close to that magical six-figure mark of 100. So, if you don't know about us on Facebook, please check us out. And if you do want to support us, click the like button, and you'll have a lot more updates than you get here on the video. The video covers the basics. If we get into some nitty-gritty stuff on the social media stuff. All right, so let's get into today. You can see over the last 12 hours, Tropical Cyclone Ita, being named yesterday or last night at about 10 p.m. by the Bureau of Meteorology, has now tracked in a westerly direction overnight, quite slowly though, so it's not in any hurry to go anywhere really. You can see here some nice outflow here to the south of the system in this really light or yellow and brown coloured cloud suggests some very high level cloud here. This isn't real thunderstorm activity, it's more high level cloud that's coming off the thunderstorms. This really dark cloud here in the center or near the center of the system suggests some very strong thunderstorm activity, and you can see here a really strong thunderstorm activity in this feeder band coming through from the north. So the system has some really good inflow of moisture, and given the fact that over the next 48 to 72 hours we're going to see a decrease in wind shear, we should see this system intensify quite rapidly. Maybe not in the next day or two, because in the next day or two there's a bit of a trough that's going to come through the Coral Sea from the south here and will increase wind shear. But after the next day or two, as we head to early to mid next week, we will see the system, or we should, or I won't say will, this is the Coral Sea, remember anything can happen. We should see the system intensify as we head into the middle part of next week. I guess the question becomes, where will it go then? So this is this morning's track forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology, and we can see that the system has moved to the west a little bit quicker than I thought looking at the satellite imagery, so a little bit faster than that. But look, overall it's going to stall out here for the next couple of days. It's not going to move too far further to the west over the next couple of days, and then it will resume a westerly track. Now, most of the guidance has a new ridge building in underneath it, which will push it northwestwards for west-northwestwards for a short period of time before eventually pushing it back out here to the west or west-southwest. Now, there is a lot of track variation, but that's what the Bureau of Meteorology is going by at their 2 to 3 day forecast maps. And then as we head to day 5, we expect the system to be located out here somewhere by about day 5, which is late next week. And so by late next week we're expecting it to be still off the coast, so believe it or not, it's not pushing anywhere in a hurry. And a very similar track forecast from the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre. You can see all of this schmozzle here suggests that the system doesn't move anywhere over the next 2 days or so. I mean, it probably moves about 100 k's or 150 k's to the west, but overall it really doesn't move anywhere in any sort of hurry. And then finally, by around about the 9th, I should say, of April, we will start to see the system accelerating towards the west or west-southwest. Now, the track forecast from the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre is in very good agreement with the Bureau of Meteorology's track forecast, albeit slightly south of that track forecast. And based on that continued motion, we should see it coastal crossing north of Cairns. However, there is more and more model disagreement with this track forecast. Also, the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre has what I just mentioned. The next couple of days, the system doesn't intensify much. It might get to a Category 2 or a weekend Category 2, but after about the late on the 7th of April, or early on the 8th of April, I should say, we start to see the system intensify a lot faster. We see this period of intensification here in this 24-hour section between 4 a.m. on the 8th of April and 4 a.m. on the 9th of April. We see this system intensify quite rapidly into a high-end Category 2, and then as we head into the 10th of April, we see the system become a Category 3. So once again, looking at it on satellite, you can see some really strong thunderstorm activity associated with a feeder band to the north. You can see the really strong storm activity near the center of the system, and you can see the outflow here of high cloud coming off the system itself. Looking at the satellite-derived winds, we can see that the southeastern quadrant and basically the southern semicircle now packs the strongest winds, and the strongest winds getting up to around about 40 knots sustained or 43 knots sustained here, according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre's summary. And as we head to have a look at the oceanic heat content here, according to the analysis available, we can see that as the system tracks in this direction, while heat content does diminish, it's still not to a point where it would limit intensification and limit current intensities. So therefore, as we head to day 5, we can see the system located here. Now, if the system continues tracking in that west-southwest direction, oceanic heat content anywhere where this blue color and above exists means that we have enough energy that can be derived from the oceans that can assist with the continued intensification or at least sustenance of the tropical cyclone. So if we look at some in-depth statistics here on the cloud temperatures that are associated with the system, we can see that the system has, over the past 12 to 18 hours, been lying in some, the convective cloud tops have been really, really high, negative 82 degrees, negative 85 degrees even, in terms of the cloud top temperatures, which suggests some really strong thunderstorms developing and some strong convection developing right around the core of the system. When we see that, it's normally associated with an intensification of the system, and that's what we've seen over the past 24 hours. These continuous convective cloud tops that are really, really cold, resulting in intensification of the system. It will be interesting to see over the next 24 to 48 hours whether or not the upper level trough that is pushing through the area may impact the system somewhat in terms of increasing wind shear, and it'll also be interesting over the next 6 to 12 hours to see if the system can maintain some of this deep convection. You can just see in the last couple of frames it might just start to be weakening that deep convection a little, but it'll be interesting to see if we can see that convection continuing throughout the day and into tonight. And then if we do, the system should be alright. If we don't, it might go through a little period of weakening there this evening and overnight before eventually re-intensifying again. So if we start to take some a 5-day look at guidance here, according to the GFS ensemble, we can see that the individual model members are pushing this system either well to the north here towards Cape Melville or just to the north towards Lockhart, or they're pushing it in a more southerly direction towards the Cairns coastline. However, the ones that do push it in a more southerly direction eventually recurve it before hitting the coast. So I guess that is something we'll need to talk about later on in this broadcast as to why that's happening. But for now, let's just have a look at the actual track forecast for the next 5 days. And we can already see a fair error margin here from the southern outlier to the northern outlier, because of a couple of different systems acting on it. And as I said, we'll talk about them later. But for 5 days, the system's not moving very quickly at all. So 5 days' time, it's still overall located around the 150 degree east mark and hasn't made a move to either hit the coast or push away from the coast just yet. The Canadian CMC model is possibly a little over-enthusiastic in pushing the system westwards and a little too fast in the whole thing. So this is 5 days' time from the Canadian CMC ensemble. We can see that the system's already overall located in the western Gulf of Carpentaria by day 5. Now that seems a little fast, at least to my untrained opinion. That seems definitely a little fast. However, the general track forecast, it could be quite accurate, but the CMC sometimes tends to oversimplify the track forecasts based on the fact that its lower resolution sometimes doesn't pick up other factors that might be in play. Similar to the GFS, the UK Met is very, very slow in the movement of this system, and we see that by day 5 the system overall is still located a little bit faster than the GFS because it moves almost directly westwards through the entire period. and located around about the 148 degree east mark. Now, what happens in the UK Met though is from that position it starts to dip southwards. Now, we're not going to talk about that far ahead yet because we've still got the next 5 days to contend with. But overall, later on in that forecast period, the system dips to more to the south, or even parts of the ensemble dip it even as far as the south-southeast. Really, after day 5, things get a little tricky. If we look at the highest resolution model that we've looked at to date, the UK Met, sorry, not the UK Met, the FIM9 model, we can see that the FIM9 has the system developing into a quite intense tropical cyclone, category 3 by that stage, and located to the east of Cooktown and pushing in a southwesterly direction by day 5. Now, remembering day 5 is Thursday night. So when I talk about day 5 in this guidance, it's Thursday night because this guidance was from last night. And if we have a look at the Euro, it is possibly one of the most northern outlying models we have, and the Euro suggests a coastal crossing around the Lockhart River area of a category 2 tropical cyclone, and the system continues to track then in a west-southwesterly direction into the Gulf and dies. So I guess the big thing to note from the guidance today and yesterday as opposed to the guidance when our last video went out, if you recall in our last video we talked about the system continuing this westerly track, pushing out here and pushing into the Kimberley or Pilbara coast eventually. Look, that seems quite an unlikely scenario, and we started to see that the possibilities or the probabilities for that scenario were dropping on the 4th of April, but they really have plummeted today and yesterday. The system now, I guess the most likely track for the system now is this southwest motion followed by a west-northwest motion followed by a westerly motion just south of where the EC has it hitting. And then from there it goes into the Gulf and pretty well either stalls and dies or hits the southwestern Gulf and then forms part of a trough system in through inland Queensland. Not like the ex-tropical cyclone Oswald. It just completely loses its identity here in the Gulf and just forms part of a big trough system in through here and just pumps a little bit of moisture into it. So look, that's a good scenario for Western Queensland farmers and Eastern Northern Territory farmers, but overall that is now the more likely scenario as opposed to the one the other night where we were saying it could go all across the top end and boom into WA. Nah, not looking very likely at all. Now, as well as that, on the 4th of April we talked about this new scenario of the system doing these ones and then out to the southeast. Now that is becoming an increasingly likely scenario. So there are two scenarios now that we're tossing up between is this one here where it hits the far north Queensland coastline north of about, or anywhere north of about Cairns, or this particular situation where it pushes in a southerly off the coast and then east-southeast or southeast direction away from the Queensland coast. So they're the two scenarios that are most favoured now. It's just a matter of which one it decides to adopt. And look at the NavGem model, and the NavGem model has a system dipping south, then pushing back up to the north, and then pushing in a west-southwesterly direction to make landfall between Cairns and Cooktown. So that's the best we can tell you with the track forecast at the moment, folks. Remember those two options that we have. The option 1, where the system tracks a little bit to the south, then pushes back up to the northwest, and then west-southwest and into the Gulf and dies. Or option 2, the system pushes in that direction and then stalls here and pushes off to the southeast. So there are our two options overall. And at the moment, the favoured option is this one here. That's the favoured option. Alright, so a coastal crossing is still favoured, and a coastal crossing on the far northern coastline of Queensland is the favoured option. Now, where on that far northern coast is obviously very important because a coastal crossing close to Cairns suggests a fairly intense tropical cyclone that will create a lot of rain for areas from about Mackay northwards. whereas a coastal crossing north of, say, Cooktown, where the overall mean is around that Cape Melville area, suggests that only places sort of Cairns northwards or even Innisfail northwards will see the heavy rain associated with the system. So where it crosses on that FNQ coast is very, very important. Now, obviously, if it adopts track number 2, this one here, not much of the coast will see much of anything except for some very, very heavy swells and some gale force winds to the south of the system. So obviously option 2 is not going to be a good rain producer for anyone. Alright, for the next 5 to 8 minutes or so, we're going to talk about the meteorological aspects of the movement rather than the what the models themselves are actually suggesting in the track forecast. So if you're not interested in that, join us after about the 20-something minute mark. Check the timeline and we'll have an update on the rainfall expected from the system. Alright folks, this is a look at the upper pattern. According to the European model, the upper pattern for this morning. And we can see that in the upper pattern we have these very upper level westerlies. They're quite strong. They're pushing in all the way from the northwestern parts of Australia, all across the southern and central Coral Sea, and out off the east of your screen, which you can't see, is a big, and I mean huge, upper level trough. Alright, so let's have a look at what's going to happen over the next 24 to 48 hours. So as we head to tonight, we see that the pattern hasn't really changed much. I guess the westerlies have moved a little bit further to the north. Now, the westerlies will try to, obviously, if you guys are watching this, you know this already, the westerlies will try to push the system out here to the southeast or the east, but if they're not strong enough to do that, or if the mid to low level flow is pushing it in the other direction, which it is right now, it's pushing it to the west. If that happens, we're going to see an increase in wind shear around the system. And you can see that that's what we're starting to find. We're starting to find increasing levels of wind shear pushing into the western Coral Sea over the next few hours. Alright, now as we head to 48 hours time, we can see that wind shear continues to develop here in the northwestern Coral Sea. However, where the system lies here, just to the south of PNG, it's very hard to tell, the south of PNG, right in there where my cursor is, wind shear remains fairly low to moderate. Now, if we have a look at the upper pattern by then, we see that the upper level, there's a new upper level trough developing in through the Coral Sea here over the period between now and tomorrow night. And that upper level trough, not quite strong enough to capture the system and push it eastward, so the system remains in a fairly weak steering environment, most likely going to keep pushing to the west, and that's what all the models are suggesting that will happen. Now, as we head to the Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday evening, we see that upper level trough still not strong enough to capture the tropical cyclone, which is located near the southern or southeastern tip of PNG. Now, if we look at the GFS model, suggesting a fairly similar situation here, the upper level trough here over the eastern Coral Sea, not amplified enough to capture the system and push it southeastwards. I guess the big issue with any type of situation where we've got an upper trough in the Coral Sea followed by a ridge is the development or the push northwards of some dry air, and we can see here anywhere to the south of about Cooktown some very dry air along the coast in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, not what you're feeling at the surface, it's in the mid-levels of the atmosphere we're talking. Now, cyclones require this colouring here, the 60, 70, 80% humidities in the mid-levels of the atmosphere to keep themselves going, and you can see that it's attached to a bit of a monsoon here, which is feeding it enough moisture to keep it going despite the dry air to the south of it. Now, as we head to Wednesday, folks, Wednesday the upper trough in the Coral Sea pushes well away from the actual cyclone itself. The cyclone remains up here in the northern Coral Sea or even possibly the northwestern Coral Sea by Wednesday night. And what we have in here over northern Queensland is a new upper level ridge that develops and forms, and that upper level ridge will stop or block any southward movement of the system, and that upper level ridge, you can see here according to the arrows, is going to try to push the system either in a west-northwest or westerly direction. And then I guess the issue becomes where the upper level high actually forms. Now, if the upper level high forms further to the west, the system will lie in a much weaker steering environment. And you can see this is exactly what the GFS model suggests. And so what we've been showing is the Euro, but you can see the GFS now at the 5 kilometre up level. The 3 kilometre up level gets a little tricky to explain to you, but the 5 kilometre up level, we can see that the overall the ridge develops well to the west of where the Euro has it developing. The Euro has the ridge developing right over northern Queensland and into the northern Coral Sea, and so the system tracks west. Now, the GFS model has the upper level high developing a lot further to the west, and that is all important because it doesn't have the ability then to capture the system and drag it to the west. So what the system does is it remains almost quasi-stationary, pushing very, very slowly to the west, but not fast enough, and this ridge isn't strong enough and not positioned well enough to actually capture the system and push it all the way west. And so I guess this is where models disagree. So up until Wednesday, we got fairly good agreement as to what's going to happen. Now, where they disagree is what happens on Wednesday when this new ridge develops over Australia, over northern Australia, and exactly the positioning of that upper level ridge as to how fast, how strong, and where it actually pushes this tropical cyclone. Because if this ridge does not take hold of this system, as the GFS suggests, eventually a new upper level trough will capture the system in 7 to 10 days time. So I guess fundamentally what people care about more in central and southern Queensland is if the system decides to, for some reason, track to the south, what are the chances of it actually making landfall as it heads further south? And the chances are very remote. Now, you can see these westerly winds here in the upper levels of the atmosphere will act like a force field to keep the actual cyclone off the coast if it decides to track as option 2. Remember, option 1 was that the system tracks in this direction and then makes landfall up here somewhere around Cape Melville. That was option 1, and option 2 was the fact that the system will adopt what option 1 does until it gets off the coast here and then pushes away. Now, I guess the big thing is, according to option 2, is there a chance of it actually making landfall? And the landfall possibilities here are remote, and they get even lower and lower as we head further south. So, or even if there is a landfall. Rainfall for the rest of today, some isolated showers on the North Tropical Coast, some showers and storms over the Torres Strait, and also some showers and storms over the top end of the territory. Also in this trough system here over eastern WA, we're going to see showers and storms in that as well. Tomorrow, we see just a slight increase in area of coverage of those showers on the tropical and North Tropical coastlines. And we see that area of enhancement of activity pushing just a little bit further to the west here on the Coburg Peninsula and also along the western top end, while the northeastern top end starts to ease off in terms of activity. We can see Tropical Cyclone Ita developing some fairly large falls of rain over 24 hours here. That's 2 to 300, 3 to 400 millimetres over 24 hours. That inland trough over eastern WA is almost stationary, but does start to push a little bit to the west. On Tuesday, that trough pushes to the east. That trough pushes a little further to the east into South Australia then, but lags back here over the Kimberley and the inland parts of Western Australia. We also see an increase in shower and storm activity on the western top end, and some showers developing on the central coast of Queensland there on the Tuesday. Tropical Cyclone Ita remains very slow moving up here in the northern Coral Sea. On Wednesday, Ita continues to track in a westerly direction but very slowly. Now, because of that, we start to see an increase in shower activity on an onshore flow here on the North Tropical Coast. The trough system across South Australia is dumping some really welcome falls of rain there, and is also finally pushing eastwards up here in the northern section of it to the central parts of the Northern Territory or western parts of the Northern Territory. So we're going to see showers and storms all the way from the western top end coastline all the way south almost to Alice Springs, or possibly even to Alice Springs. And on the Thursday, we should see that trough system start to break up, and we should see rainfall associated with Tropical Cyclone Ita increasing along the Queensland coastline anywhere north of about Ingham. and we also see some variability in the forecast tracks, so we start to see some heavier rain pushing onto the coast, while most of the models keep the system offshore on Thursday, and so the heavier rain stays offshore. So once again, as we head to Thursday, a lot of variability in the model. Remember, all the models are pretty clear cut on what Ida's going to do till Wednesday, and then by Thursday they go into a frenzy of different opinions and different forecasts. Alright, so the next 4 days, here's where all the rain's falling, obviously, but also this trough system over inland parts of Australia is going to create a lot of rain for this section. On the next 4 days, that trough system breaks up. The Coral Sea Cyclone will either hit the Queensland coast or remain just off it and pushing in a south to southeast direction. The western top end coastline could be receiving some very welcome late season showers and storms. They're always pretty spectacular this time of year. And also the North Kimberley region could be receiving some showers and storms in that 4-day forecast period. So I guess the big issue though is what's going to happen here. And as I said, to Wednesday, we know what's going to happen. After Wednesday, things get complicated. Alright folks, thanks for watching. We'll have another update on Monday, around about Monday afternoon, because there is a NRL game here in Townsville, which I have to be at. So there won't be an update Monday night. It'll be more around Monday lunchtime or early afternoon. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Good night. Goodbye.